let us go ahead and get started. We've had a little change in plans, and I'm going to just let Annie explain that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Strohsnyder, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Kitsap, along with Lenny Skarin. Before we get started, I would like to tell you a little about the League and why we are sponsoring the Speak Up School. The League was founded more than 100 years ago in the days of the women's suffrage movement. We strive to create a democracy where everyone has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Although we are called the League of Women Voters, we welcome people of all genders to join. The League is nonpartisan, but does take positions on issues of public policy after thorough study. League committees also conduct extensive reviews of topics of interest and publish their findings as reports. Studies and reports on many subjects are available on the League of Women Voters of Washington website. They provide excellent resources for anyone seeking more information on topics such as courts, election methods, or redistricting. A thorough review of redistricting by the State League was published in 2017. That report concludes with suggestions on improving Washington State's redistricting process. Specifically, the review committee stated that more could be done to improve the quality of input to the process and the degree of public participation, not only in the hearings, but throughout the process. The review committee suggests that the League consider working on outreach and training of the public both before and during the redistricting process to aid in the quality of public input. The League of Women Voters is pleased to welcome you all to this training session today. It is part of our effort to reach out to the public and provide education about redistricting and its importance in the functioning of our democratic republic. We are sorry that our keynote speaker, State Senator Emily Randall from the 26th District, is unable to attend today. The League of Women Voters of Washington has developed the Speak Up School project with 7 training modules to support anyone who wants to testify before the Redistricting Commission. The skills you will learn in these trainings will help you write effective public testimony and deliver your message in a public hearing. We are glad you are with us today to learn more about making the voice of your community heard. Let's get started.
Thanks, Annie. And obviously, I'm the other half of the co-president team here. My name's Lenny Skarin. I live in Hansville. So between us, Port Orchard and Hansville, we cover most of the League of Women Voters of Kitsap County. So I have a couple of housekeeping things before we get started with the meat of the program. And that is, earlier I asked those of you who joined in to tell us what town you're from in Kitsap, or if you're not in Kitsap County, tell us anyway. If you don't know how to rename yourself, wave or something, and we'll try and get that attended to so we know where people are. And everybody knows where everyone else is too. And then I don't think I have any other major issues. We may still have a couple of people joining us. We are recording this, so some of you may much prefer to pause your video, but we enjoy seeing faces, especially when we're talking like this. There'll be a time when we're screen sharing and you won't see much of anyone. So I'm hoping also that everyone got the emails I sent with the attachments. Is there anybody who did not? If you did not get it, okay, Debbie, I'm going to try and send it to you while Susan's presenting. So if you can check your email. It's helpful to have the handouts that were attached to the reminder email, and it came from me. So if anybody is missing that, we're going to be referring to several of those. So it would be really good to have those. So the only other people I want to introduce besides my co-presenter, and we're going to have a couple of volunteers later that we'll introduce doing some things. Behind the League of Women Voters frame is our tech support person, Maury Lewis. Hi, Maury. And if you have any problems, she's the one that I referenced helping you out. But so far, I think we've got everybody on board and doing the things that they need to do. And then my co-presenter today is actually Susan Griggs. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's going to do the first presentation, and she has a couple of roles as well.
Slideshow. Can everybody see this? And I don't know, let me get it bigger. There we go. Okay. And so if you can see this, welcome to the Speak Up School. I'm Susan Griggs, as Lenny indicated, and I am the co-chair of this committee, and I'm also the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I am very glad that you are here. The Speak Up School is a series of power-packed trainings that are designed to inspire effective testimony to the Washington State Redistricting Commission. Our goal is to empower you to speak with your unique voice and advocate for the changes you hope to see. Now, the question is, why is redistricting so important? And so we want to have this module explain why it is and help you to become cognizant of the difference that redistricting can have on the democratic process, and encourage you to really want to share your input so that redistricting this year will be done in a fair and just way. We'll be taking you through a series of training modules. You see them on this slide. This module is the first one, Module 2. The Module 1 was our webinar on Redistricting 101, which some of you have already seen, and hopefully you will be able to follow this Speak Up School even if you haven't. But this module is going to explain the important role that redistricting plays in our democracy and will prepare you for the work ahead. Following this session or this module, then Lenny will talk in Module 4, the next one on here, about how to prepare your personal testimony and give you tools to create a statement that clearly communicates what you want the commissioners to hear and do. And then next week on Saturday, we'll share Module 5, which is testifying, and it will give you some tools on effective public speaking to help ensure the commissioners will pay extra special attention to your testimony. During our last session on April 29th, we are going to explore maps and data. And that is Module 3, which is below to the right, this module. The Data Lens module presents a way to look at some of the critical questions you might want to consider as you plan and write your recommendations. The other modules are optional, and we will help you to know how to go to it. The module on DRA is one for basically using an app to make your own maps. Each of these training sessions will include opportunities for interaction and group work. There will also be plenty of time for questions and answers. Finally, we will talk about opportunities for you to practice your testimony and get follow-up coaching. Okay, let's begin. The goals for this session are, we are going to explain the Washington State redistricting process. We'll help you understand how it works and what you can expect when you testify. We will review the criteria required by the state constitution in drawing district maps. And then we will emphasize the importance of having citizens participate. Your voice matters. Oh, I think I skipped one. I don't know how that happened. Redistricting and reapportionment. Redistricting is the process of drawing legislative and congressional districts so that each district has approximately equal numbers of people. The process uses information gathered from the most recent census. We believe that districts should be drawn in a way that ensures all citizens have a voice. When districts are drawn in a fair way, democracy works. This matters. Now we get to this slide, which explains the timeline for both the Washington State redistricting process and the Speak Up involvement. We anticipate that the dates of the hearings will be from June to August, and then again from September to October of 2021. We will, however, let you know once the dates are set. There are redistricting commission meetings that at this point have been every other Monday night at 7 o'clock. The next one is this coming Monday at 7 o'clock, and you can find out about it by going to the Washington Redistricting Commission, and I've just Googled it to get there, and then they will tell you when the dates are. As I understand the agenda for Monday, it's going to tell us something about when they're going to have the meetings. So just because they're every other week doesn't mean they're going to continue to be every other week, but we will find out this coming Monday. And they will also say something about how they're going to request input. So it's an important meeting to go and listen to find out what's going to happen. After the Speak Up Schools, or this Speak Up Schools is held, coaches will begin to work with those who are going to testify so that they will be ready for the public. It's always useful to have somebody listen to you and give you feedback, because I know very clearly how I can do ums and do other things and not focus well if I don't have somebody sharing some feedback with me. The commission needs to have the maps drawn by November 15th of 2021. The legislation is able to make some changes to the maps, but their changes can only affect less than 2% of a district. The legislature has only 30 days to amend the commission's maps, and it has to be voted on by a 2/3 vote in each chamber. The final deadline for the maps to be approved is February 2nd, 2022. Now let's look at the current commission. Who are these folks? These are the 2011 Washington Redistricting Commission. It is a 5-member independent commission where 3 of the 4 voting members have to approve the maps. It was established by a constitutional amendment in 1983. The majority and the minority leaders of the Washington State Senate and Washington House each appoint 1 commissioner. This commissioner cannot be an elected official or a party officer who has served in the prior 2-year period, nor can the commissioner be a registered lobbyist within the past year. There is a 5th commissioner, the chair. The chair is a non-voting member and is nonpartisan, and the chair is appointed by 4 other commissioners. The 2021 commissioners, as you can see here, are the chair is Sarah Augustine, and then the Senate appointed the Democratic caucus appointed Brady Pinheiro Walkinshaw, and the Republican caucus of the Senate appointed Joe Fain, and the House caucus, the Democratic House caucus appointed April Sims, and the Republican House caucus appointed Paul Graves. Now, there are some rules that the Washington State Redistricting Commission has to follow when they draw up their maps. The state constitution requires that congressional and state legislative districts should be contiguous, compact, and convenient, and follow natural, geographic, artificial, or political subdivision boundaries. The Constitution also states that the Redistricting Commission must not purposefully draw plans to favor or discriminate against any political party or group. The state statutes require congressional and state legislative districts preserve areas recognized as communities of interest, and state statutes also require the commission to draw districts that provide fair and effective representation and encourage electoral competition. And then the other one is that they have to have approximately equal population. Now, if you listen to all of these redistricting rules and you know how the state has been redistricted in the past, you will realize that it is a very hard, it's really hard to meet all of these specific rules. And a few of these rules were not met in the last time we redistricted and even the time before. Now, communities have different priorities, and this quote by Crystal Fincher, a political consultant, reminds us that the way that districts can be drawn may enhance the voice of certain communities, or it may dilute the influence, power, and ability of those communities to be fairly represented. And that is one of the major reasons why we are doing this Speak Up School, because we want all communities to be represented in a fair way. Redistricting can be done in ways that protect incumbents. It can be done in ways that determine which political power controls the government, and it can be done in ways that allows competition in a district. Washington has a bipartisan redistricting commission, so we don't have a way that would usually have one party controlling the Congress and the state governments. But we can have some of these other effects of redistricting. When there is competition in an election, officials recognize that they need to listen to their constituents in order to be reelected. And thus, those officials will work harder to represent their constituents. So that is something that is very important. And that has been something that has not always happened when districts have been redistricted. When we have fair redistricting, the following is true. Voters pick officials. Officials don't pick voters. Officials listen to their constituents, since their constituents can vote them out of office. The concerns of the voters are followed up by their officials. Communities of interest have officials that will care about them also. Officials are accountable to the voters, and incumbents do not have an unfair advantage at the polls. This is the way that Washington State's congressional districts are now drawn. We have 10 districts, and we will continue to only have 10 districts. This is the way that the Washington legislative districts are drawn at this time. There are 49 districts. It is interesting to note that the 15th district, which is not ours, now has a majority Latino population, but does not have a majority of Latino voters, since the count includes people under 18, undocumented immigrants, and permanent residents. It is to be assumed, however, that if it's redrawn in the same way, during the next 10 years, it will have a majority of Latino voters. There are now 4 so-called majority minority districts in Washington. The other 3, the 11th, the 33rd, and 37th, are all in South King County. Now I want to find out what word you think of when you hear the term redistricting. Please share your comments. And if it's such a big screen, I am not able to see, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm not able to see what your comments are. So maybe Lenny can share what is in the chat that says what your comments, or else you can speak up. What is one word that comes to you when you think of the word redistricting?
Well, one word that's been put in several times is gerrymandering, with a footnote of manipulation, schools, corruption, contortion. Yeah, that's another way of describing gerrymandering, I think. I would also say for myself, it's an opportunity. It's a representative opportunity for voters.
Thank you. Yes, we cannot have partisan gerrymandering, but we can have other kinds of gerrymandering. We also cannot have prison gerrymandering because some states have all of the prisoners in a prison counted as voters or residents in that district. And then the few people who actually can vote in that district have much more ability to be represented than those who don't have all these prisoners. But in Washington state, we have the prisoners be considered residents in the town that they came from. And so we don't have prison gerrymandering, but we can have other types of gerrymandering. So it's important to recognize that and share our input with the redistricting commission so that there isn't that gerrymandering. Now, it's very important for you to testify, and these are some of the reasons that we think of as to why you should testify. My major reason is that we want to have the state redistricted in a fair way so that all citizens have a voice. And that's something that's very difficult because the district has to have a certain number of people in their district because we have to have equal numbers. And there are some communities that have just a small percentage. And so they're going to have a small percentage no matter how it is redistricted. But there are ways to have that percentage minimized or maximized. But if we think of it, you should testify if your organization holds a unique perspective. And so if your community has a unique perspective that needs to be out there, it is important to testify. You want to better inform policymakers and your community. You want to attract attention to an issue or position. You want to gain media coverage on an issue. And you want to position yourself and or your organization as advocates for an issue. And we would like to be able to have media coverage when there are these public hearings so that people's testimony is not just given to the redistricting commission, but that all residents can know something about the testimony, and thus we can make the commission accountable to the people who have testified. Are there any questions? And I'm afraid I can't see very many people. Well, I can only see, 5 at a time. So you may have to speak up or somebody else can help me know if there's a question.
Allison has a question.
Yes, Allison, why don't you share it?
unmute.
Oh, please mute.
My question had to do with how I noticed that on the agenda for Monday, their tribal involvement plan is on the agenda. And I was wondering how tribes play into this, and are those rules such that tribal reservations can't be broken up?
Well, right now, the Colville Reservation is broken up into into 3 districts. So they have been broken up, and the Yakama Nation has been broken up into 2 districts. And so that is extremely important that that be considered. And so I would like to have a good number of Indigenous people testifying so that the redistricting commissions will redistrict in a fair way. I know that there was one person who ran for election in the Yakama Nation, and all of his relatives could not vote for him because they were in the other district. And the same thing with Colville. And so that is a big concern. So I'm not exactly sure what that consultation is going to be, but I'm very pleased that they will be consulting with the Indigenous nations, and we'll find out on Monday night what that is all going to be about, whether or not it just means that the Indigenous citizens will just have to sign up to testify and they're going to listen to them just like they listen to all the other people, or whether there's going to be something special. But I know that it is government to government, and so they needed to have some advice as to how to handle a government to government relationship. And so I know that they consulted with their lawyers in the last 2 weeks, and we're going to hear what they found out. So I'm very interested in that as well. The state Speak Up School has been consulting with some of the people from the Indigenous nations and are seeing if we can have a Speak Up school that is specifically for the individuals from the Indigenous nations. And I'm just thinking that we need to have as many Indigenous natives testify, but we will find out on Monday night exactly what the redistricting commission will be doing about it.
And there are a couple more questions in the chat, Susan. I'd like to move on. Carolyn asks a really great question. Do people who testify, are they testifying more broadly about Washington State or versus testifying for their special districts?
You can testify either way. One of the things is I listened to the 2011, some of the testimony for 2011, and the commissioners basically were saying, well, you've got to start at one place in the state and then go across and redistrict. And so you haven't helped me to quite figure out how I'm supposed to do that. And so it is good to have the whole state perspective, but it's also good to be advocating for your specific community. And so it really means that if you have a good story about how redistricting affects your community, it's important that the redistricting commissioners hear that. On the other hand, I would suggest that the Latinx community think about the fact that Kitsap County doesn't have more than 12% Latinx. And yet, if there are more representatives that can be voted in from areas that have a higher percentage of Latinx, then there's more representation in the legislature for the Latinx. So I would suggest that Latinx people in Kitsap can go and testify in terms of how the state needs to be redistricted so that there will be more representation from the Latinx. because I think the more diversity we have in the legislature, the more ideas will come up, the different ways of looking at things will come up, and the more the citizens of the state feel like they are being listened to, whether it's their representative or a representative on the other side of the state who happens to be able to represent your community better. And so, you know, I think either way, whichever way you can have a good story that can impact the commissioners and can help your community get better representation, whether it's the representative from your district or whether it's a representative from Wenatchee, because that's got a big Latinx community, or a representative from Colville if you're an Indigenous person, because in Kitsap, we won't have any representative that will necessarily be from the Indigenous nations. However, I understand we have good nation-to-nation communication with our tribal nations in Kitsap with the legislature, but still, in other places, that may not be the case. So did that answer the question? I hope.
I don't know if you can unshare your screen. That might make you
Oh, definitely. Yes, I can. I'm just not thinking.
But there is one other question in the chat. I think I say it, Alistair from Bremerton is asking a little bit more about the public meetings of the commission and how those are structured. I think maybe if we spend just a few minutes on that, then we'll move on to part 2 here.
In the public meetings, there is some information that is talked about before they have 15 minutes of public comment. And so if they're going to have any action item, they share that before the public comment. So if anybody wants to talk about that action item, that can be talked about before they vote on the action item. They usually will, well, no, this is the second meeting where they've had a executive director. They have a paid person and then this 5-member commission who are not paid. And so that executive director is going to speak about what she's done. She's got to come up, or she was asked to come up with a plan for getting public input. And so she's supposed to, we'll talk about that to some extent this Monday night. I know that they have to hire a lot of people, so they probably will tell us if they've hired these people who can work for each commissioner so that some work can get done that is more extensive than what a volunteer can do in that volunteer's free time, because all of our commissioners have full-time jobs. And then they will have the public comment, and then they will have any action items. The first public comment time I went to, they gave the people that were going to speak 1 minute to speak. I did a testimony then and I had planned it for 2 minutes. So I quickly had to change it because I didn't realize it was going to be only 1 minute. The next one, there weren't very many people. I think it was only Leonard Forsman, the tribal chief from Suquamish, and I keep forgetting his last name. He was the only one who testified, and so he was given 3 minutes. So you don't know if it's going to be 1 to 3 minutes that you're given for public testimony. And the commission is basically taking in any public input that is sent to them between meetings. And the chair is summarizing all the public comment that has come in between the 2 meetings. So that is done before the public comment time. So in reality, we can testify between now and whenever they have public hearings. I only testified to say, please have as much opportunity for public input as possible, and suggested that maybe they even want to have a YouTube channel so somebody could record their 3-minute testimony and send it in. I have not heard that been discussed since, But anyway, so I that's as much as I know about the public meetings. They basically have everybody in order have a time to comment, and that order that the public meetings give to the commissioners changes. So the first time we'll start with April Sims, and then the next time that she gets comment from the commissioners, it might be Joe Fain, and the next time it may be, but you know, it's done in a fair way as far as I can tell. Okay, is there another question?
I think we ought to take a little break here
Okay.
and get ready to move to a different topic. There are questions in the chat, and I would invite Susan to respond to people directly in the chat. I will also say that at the end of my presentation, I do have a slide with how you can sign up for the information about the Redistricting Commission. And the advantage to doing that, you don't have to go every time, obviously, but that gives you several advantages. And so we'll talk about that again at the very end. If anybody needs a stretch break, please take that. I'm gonna spend just a few seconds here getting my screen sharing, and let's hope mine is queued up the way I want it. I'm never sure if it's gonna, looks like it's working. And I can put it in play mode. Whoops. And that'll make it bigger for you. There we go. Now, can everybody see that? Since we're all muted, I hope there's somebody who can give me some feedback. Susan, can you see the screen?
I can.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm going to take, like I said, a few seconds. There are probably several people who'd like to grab a drink of water or stand up and stretch or wiggle around or wish they were outside on this nice sunny but chilly day. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending Speak Up School. I'm not going to re-show the slide. We're moving on to the next module, module 4, which is testimony. Susan showed that at the beginning, the different modules that we have, and we're going to get through 2 of them today and several more in the future. As you know, the purpose of the school is to provide you, the participants, with background information and skills to help you ensure the testimony you will give before the Redistricting Commission in the spring and fall of this year, 2021, is effective. We want everybody to feel comfortable and confident about testifying. But let's not get the cart before the horse. Before you testify, you need to plan and create your presentation. Testimony comes before testifying. This session focuses on testimony. Next week, we'll be talking about testifying, or otherwise known as public speaking. In this module, our goals are to learn the hows of writing effective testimony. Now, several of you are probably already pretty expert at this, but we want everybody to get comfortable with putting together a testimony statement. So what we'll be doing is we'll be reviewing some examples of testimony. We'll be examining a variety of tools. So those are some of the handouts. We'll ask you to practice writing parts of a testimony between now and next week, and to learn some of the best practices about testimony. I want to point out that while this module is focusing on testimony before the Redistricting Commission, you'll be able to use these skills and tools that we're sharing in a variety of settings testifying on any topic, meeting with any legislator or group of decision makers, your city council, the county commissioners, and other groups. So we really hope this is a skill building opportunity for everyone. So we're going to do a little check-in real quick now. And since I, sure enough, can't get to the polling, I'm going to ask Susan to launch the poll and ask all of you to just respond real quickly. And she should be able to, once you click on the one that,
Yes, I have launched the poll, so
yeah,
we are
and
getting.
so you
the results.
click on the one that works for you, and we should all be able to see it kind of in real time. We'll run it long enough to get quite a few people to enter. Looks like we're getting 10, so we're close to everybody is
It looks like 10 out of 10 have answered.
yeah, really quick. So thank you all. It's interesting to know that there's actually a fair number, 60% who have experience, but kind of want to fine tune it a little more. I see that got chopped off there. I'm not quite sure if that's probably user error in putting them in this first poll. And then there's almost 40% of you, a third at least, who have not had any experience writing testimony. So hopefully we'll cover all of those topics. You want to go ahead and end the poll, Susan?
Sure.
So how do you get it? Oh, I guess we shared the results. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
stop
stopped sharing.
There's more steps to this. We haven't
Okay,
done this before.
Whatever. Let's see if this just it takes care of it if I just push that button.
Oh, is it that little red button at the top?
So right now I see your poll. However, that's on your slide, so you can go on to the next slide, I think.
Okay, but I'm still seeing the polls up. So see if you can close that. And maybe we'll get some tech help from Maury here because on my screen, the poll is still up and it's blocking the slide. Is anyone else?
You can't go to polling and close it up?
I can't get to the.
Okay, because.
I see the slide that says, what is a testimony?
And is there a thing in front of it?
Nope.
Nothing.
Okay, so that's just on my screen. Well, we'll have to work around.
And Jeannie doesn't see the poll either, so I think
Okay.
it's you that has to figure out what to do to get rid of it.
I suspect it's
Hey,
because
Lenny, maybe you just have to answer the poll.
Yes, that's it. She didn't answer it. She cheated.
well, I'm one of the hosts, so I'm not
Yep.
supposed to, but I think
But if
that's
you-
also why
But if you
I-
answer it, it comes down.
Okay, well, I can't get it to, my cursor won't go into it, so.
Oh.
So that's a different problem. But if the rest of you are seeing the slides, I'm going to move ahead.
Well, maybe, Lenny, maybe I will make you not a host,
That might
because
help.
then you should be able maybe to vote on it, so it'll go away.
All right, we'll try
Should I
that.
give that a try?
Sure. Mhm.
Okay.
Now it's asking to relaunch it, it looks like. It went away. Thank you.
Okay.
The miracles of technology. We are all on this learning curve. By the time we get to be experts, we're going to get to meet in person again. Anyway, that was very helpful, both as a learning curve and for us. So what we're talking about next is, what is testimony? Now, it has two features. It has a dictionary definition of being defined as a declaration or statement given. But the important thing for our purposes is that testimony is a written document, and it includes the content of what you will say when you're testifying, and it includes the contents of what you will submit in writing. We strongly recommend that when you give public testimony, you also submit it in writing. So just to clarify, Testifying is the actual delivery, the public speaking part of your testimony. Testimony is written, testifying is oral. I hope no one is confused about the difference between testimony and testifying at this point. If you are, we're going to need to come back to this at the end. So there are a number of, oh, I think I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. Sorry about that. I thought it was coming next. There are a number of important components of effective testimony. We call them the building blocks, and they include things that we're going to go over twice, actually. But the research and the literature about effective testimony points out that you need to first establish your credentials. You need to clearly identify the topic, the critical point that you want to make. You need to tell a story that engages the audience. You want to provide evidence and list, well, this will happen or won't happen if you don't do what I ask. It's kind of the consequences of not following your recommendations. And at the end, you want to be real specific about what you're asking for. Now, that's a lot of words, but there's an easier kind of fun way to look at these and remember them. One of the handouts that you were sent is this handy guide. It's filled out and got some text on it, so you can refer to it again later. The way to look at this for yourself is to start with the thumb. So the first thing is to introduce yourself, give your credentials. The second is your critical point. What is your main issue? The personal impact. Why do you care about this particular issue? What's your hook, if you will, in this? Your story is kind of integral to all parts of this. And the third finger is that you're going to give facts to support your position. You're going to give evidence. And the last one is, of course, the ask. Specifically. So we're talking credentials, a critical point, personal impact, your story, the evidence, the supporting facts, and the ask. So let's go through these in a little bit more detail. Number one, establishing credentials. You want to list the basic things, your name, where you live, what district you're in, particularly if you want to make a point about congressional districts, be sure and say which congressional district you're in. If you want to make a point about a legislative district, identify your legislative district, your contact information, and if you have an affiliation, that's important as well, although do make sure that you have permission to speak for others. Okay, let's see if we can get. So another key point, number two, is to identify your critical point. Why are you here? What's your purpose? What's your issue? And then really focus on the one thing that you want the commissioners to remember from you. Obviously, one of the most important impacts is your personal story. there are a variety of reasons for telling a story, not just because it gives you personal credibility, but it also establishes or can help build a relationship with the commissioners. And we all know that people in a relationship care more about each other, and you want the commissioners to care about your point of view. It not only illustrates the point you are making, it adds validity and says, I have a right to be here because of this personal engagement, personal investment. And it can be quite memorable. Some of that might involve, for example, if you're a member of one of the indigenous nations, you might show up in tribal dress. They'll remember you, but do be careful. In 2011, for some reason, one of the people testifying put a clothespin on his nose. The commissioners didn't have a clue what he spoke about later, but they remembered the clothespin. So you want to think about what kind of an impression you want to make and make it memorable, but not more memorable than your statement. So we're going to take a look at a particular story, and I'm hoping that somebody who got the handout would be willing to read this. That's the one that has the kapow on it, the power of a personal story. Is there somebody who would be interested in reading that aloud for everyone, or willing to read it aloud? If you are, just unmute and read it. It looks like I'm going to get to read it, unless I'm missing somebody. I can't see very many people at the same time.
I can read it for you, Lenny, if you want. This is Alice.
That'd be great, Allison.
Okay, I have to get to that screen. Let's see. Okay, the power of a personal story. Heatha and two others met with Washington Senator Jamie Peterson regarding the cost of living increase legislation, Senate Bill 6165. The ask, his support of COLA increase for Plan 1 retirees. His initial response, no, my parents are both retired educators and they are doing fine. When probed, he acknowledged that his parents were living off the income from investments and saving their retirement pensions for special expenditures, potential health needs, and other contingencies. Keitha then went on to explain why support of the COLA increase was so important. She told him that, like many other Plan 1 retirees who are in their 70s and 80s and beyond, she was having difficulty making ends meet. When adjusted for inflation, the purchasing power of Plan 1 retiree pensions has decreased approximately 40%. Keitha explained that as a single woman, she had not been able to make investments, so she had no other income. And because she had a health condition requiring constant medication, sometimes she could not pay all her bills. She shared that many retirees end up destitute and cost the state 3 times more money in state assistance than the cost of COLA increase being requested. Then Keitha and the 2 other women with her provided some facts. The average pension is $2,000 a month. After federal income taxes, approximately 15%, and another $250 deduction for PEBB supplemental health insurance, they are left with just $1,370 to pay for all bills and expenses. There has only been one COLA increase since 2010, and that was a one-time event. Other state retirement systems have built in a 3% COLA. The 3 women asked the senator to consider his position and vote in favor of SB 6165, The vote was to be taken the next day and also to consider sponsoring a bill next year to make the COLA increases consistent with other retirement systems. After their discussion, the senator promised to give their request consideration. As she left, Keitha thanked the senator for his time and consideration for the most vulnerable educator retirees. As she shook his hand, she said, "When I run out of money, as most retirees will, I will be using whatever I have for medications because I am diabetic." Then she added, "When there's no money for food, I will be first in line at your house for dinner, and I will be bringing friends like me." The senator laughed and got the point. The next morning he voted in favor of the bill. The next day, when he saw Keitha in the hall, he smiled and waved across the lobby.
Thank you, Allison.
Okay.
Let's take a minute to reflect on what did we hear? What made it impactful? And anybody can unmute and kind of share your thoughts on what caught your attention in this story.
Well, it sounded very dramatic to me, and it was something that she wasn't speaking just for herself. She was speaking for anyone who is in a similar position. And I think the legislator could imagine that not all retired educators are going to have a discretionary income that they could have put into investments when they were working. And so she really was speaking for a much broader group of people than just herself.
Thank you, Donna. Are there others who want to speak? Or if there's things in the chat, which I can't see, Susan, if you would read anything.
Yes, one person, Alistair, mentioned Keitha's personable story, and then I think this is Murray who said the fact evidence that no COLA increase in years is put. And then Jeannie said humor at the end, which all of those things. And Carolyn said she used humor at the end to get her point across and connect by inviting herself to dinner at his house. And, there's no doubt that if you really put it in concrete terms, he got the idea that really something needed to be done.
Exactly. And I love this Kapow cartoon added to this because it's true. And thank you all for your own observations. This is what we want the commissioners to hear when they hear these kind of stories. It had a personal impact. The data, the facts that she used to back up her perspective. She worked at establishing a relationship partly by the humor she used to make it memorable. I'm not sure I'd be brave enough to use humor that way, but I'm thankful that she was able to pull this across. And obviously, these are the kinds of things that happen as we gain experience speaking in public. So let's back up and talk a little bit about where do we get evidence? Providing evidence is really useful. What data and facts do you have to support your position or point? The commissioners are going to need facts if they're going to accept your argument. They need to have some way of saying, and that may include also reminding them about facts so that they can support the stand or the decision or the position that you want them to take with the redistricting maps. So you want to make your research, your evidence research based, and there's help coming on this. Those of you who are able to attend on April 29th, we will be doing a data lenses module that can provide you with facts and details, such as the percent of minorities in our district. The MAPS project also has an impact on the evidence that you can give. What happens to voter strength if lines are drawn as you proposed? And there's a few of us who are willing to get into the information on mapping. And we'll be talking a little bit more about some of the specific information, the organizations that can help you with your effort to get the facts. Another thing that you want to be sure and do is to list the consequences. And that may sound kind of alarmist in some ways, but if you can make a case about how things will go or what will happen if nothing is changed, nothing is done, that's useful. If you can explain the benefits, the positive consequences of your proposed change, that's also useful. It's the kind of thing that the commissioners like to do. They want to make people happy. So they're going to welcome any information on consequences, particularly positive ones, but also consideration of negative ones that you may know about. And sometimes that may mean that some people are going to be given a little bit more advantage than others. And sometimes we want to point out that that may be fair redress for example, for rural people to not be always outvoted by city folks and people living in the suburbs and the urban areas. When you close your testimony, you want to be sure and make an ask. What do you want the commission to do? What do you want them to consider or to change? And working on that concluding statement will be worth all the time you invest in it, because that's the last thing they're going to hear from you. And it's also possible that it's the only thing they're going to remember after they've heard lots and lots of people testify. One of the advantages this time with the remote online testimony is that a lot of things will be recorded. Whether or not it will all be analyzed and digested is another subject. And it's unlikely, but it might happen. It's possible that the commissioner will have a question or even raise a point to counter your arguments or your viewpoint. In that case, it's good to be able to cite where your facts came from. And it's also possible that they'll be asking you a question that's beyond the research that you did, and it's not your responsibility to know everything. So don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer. If it involves getting more information, particularly from the constituents that you've worked with, your neighborhood, your group, or whatever, tell them you'll get back to them. So a quick review. One exercise I'm going to invite you to do if you want, and that's to take a blank piece of paper and outline your hand and jot down the 5 components of effective testimony on a piece of paper. It's kind of a challenge. In just a second, I'm going to pop back in there the words that identify those things, but sometimes it's good to kind of take a break from looking at the screen, draw your hand and write down what you remember. It's probably not that important to get the 5 components in specific order, except perhaps for the first and last, but to include all the key points for yourself. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds for those of you who are letting yourselves take rest of your eyes from the computer screen for a minute. And then I'm going to start popping in the key words. Credentials, introduce yourself. Critical point, what's my issue? Your personal impact, why I care. What's my hook in this? Your story, kind of flesh out that middle paragraph, so to speak. Evidence, the facts that you have supporting position. And remember, you don't have to be an expert. And the ask. Okay, so now you've maybe done a little sketch. You know what needs to be in your testimony, but you're thinking, oh, okay, I can review these points. I know what's in them, but what do I say? And how do I do it? Well, we can't spell out any positions for you to take when you testify, but we hope that by the end of this session, you'll be comfortable in knowing where you might find content information. And there are some things to keep in mind as you go to putting the essentials on paper. Use simple, clear language. Arrange it in the order of the 5 essentials. Limit yourself to 1 page. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we have some templates to guide your writing. One of those I emailed to you is the quick and easy testimony fill-in. And it's really good because it is organized in a way that gives you the key things. So you thank them for allowing to speak. For example, you tell your name and where you live and what district you're in and what you want to, like to draw your attention to the issue of, and then effectively this means a particular thing, the facts, etc., can be in there, and then the ask and your information at the bottom. So this is a very handy, quick and easy template that you can use. You can print it out and fill in the blanks. You can put it on nice paper and leave out the lines, but do it in a particular order. So it's a very useful resource template. And now we're gonna, in some of the training sessions, they're doing breakout rooms and small groups. And my experience with those is that sometimes it's good to hear somebody struggle a little bit or volunteer. And Susan and I recruited a couple of volunteers for using this template. And so I'm going to start with our first volunteer, Martha Burke, and I'll ask her to unmute herself. She's volunteered to adopt an alternate personality and write a sample testimony for somebody other than herself. So I'm going to ask you to listen carefully and jot down some notes. Martha?
All right, so you want me to go ahead?
Go ahead.
All right, so just as introduction, I'm speaking as an African American, as you'll see. So it's not me, but this is an imaginative person. So here's my testimony. Dear Commissioners, I am an African American and I live on Rainier Avenue in Bremerton, which is part of the 35th Legislative District. I'm submitting this written testimony so you can better understand how the current district boundaries affects me and others in Bremerton. The 35th Legislative District covers all of Mason County, part of Thurston County, and part of Bremerton, including where I live. There are close to 105,000 registered voters in the 35th, of which Bremerton has about 21,000. We're about a little more than 20%. All of our legislators live in Mason County, with the majority of the population. Over 88% of Mason County is white Caucasian. Only 1% is Black. However, I am an African American, and almost 10% Bremerton is Black or biracial. Most of the 35th is rural. I live in a city. As you consider the redistricting of our state, keep in mind that not only should you make the population size equivalent for every district, you should always work to make sure that all citizens are equally represented by their legislators. I don't think I am, because it would take everyone in the part of Bremerton that is in the 35th voting as a block before there would be enough to impact a legislative election in the 35th. Basically, that means that the legislators in the 35th can, for the most part, ignore our wishes and priorities without any consequence. Bremerton right now is split into 3 legislative districts, which essentially means that we are not adequately represented in any of them. I urge the commissioners to take our concerns into account as you begin to adjust these boundaries and put Bremerton in one district so our voice can count. Thank you for your time and consideration of my request. Sincerely. So that's it.
Thank you, Martha. You can see why we like this testimony. It covers a lot of the key points. Would others like to kind of comment? What was the impact? What key points did you note? Be sure to unmute. Ted?
Sure. Thanks for writing that, Martha. As from the 23rd, that's exactly a message I want to hear and understand. That's a well done. What I really liked was the representation that if you all voted as a block from Bremerton, you were still going to be ignored by legislatures that lived distantly and rural, and that's something I would remember.
Other comments?
One of the things I want to mention is that she did talk about two of the rules of the Washington State Redistricting Commission, that they are not supposed to split up political boundaries and that they are supposed to provide fair and effective representation. And so she brought those key features up. And I think it's very important to bring up some of those rules that they're supposed to be following so that they then recall that and try to do something about it.
Thank you, Susan. Donna?
Yeah, well, I'm from the 35th, and what struck me is that because the majority of voters for the 35th are in Mason County, that Mason County has this oversized role, and it's a quite conservative area. It has this oversized role and impact on what happens in an election. And it makes me think, well, maybe we really need to add at least another number of voters as big as that so that there can be some kind of tempering on the very conservative tone of Mason County. I was there during about 5 months during the campaign last year, and there wasn't an hour that went by when there wasn't a huge truck with a big Trump sign going up and down the main street in Shelton. So this testimony really brought that home about the dominance of the Mason County attitude.
Yeah, I'll mention that this came out of what I've heard from, like you, Donna, of people that I use the 35th, but I have heard this also from people talking about the 23rd, that they didn't feel like their voice was heard for a similar reason, because most of the population and the voters are north of Bremerton, and And poor Bremerton is split in those. It's also in the 26. So that's what happens. And I will mention also information that's in there I got from both the auditor, who's very helpful, our auditor, and then also the state election website. So I think you were asking, Lenny, about where you get information or data, and that's
that's always, yeah, that's always a good idea to know where you got that in case you are asked.
yeah. Okay.
Any other quick comments about different aspects of things that you noticed?
I'm sorry.
And if you're muted,
Alistair mentioned in his chat that the statistics and voter population brings the picture into clarity. And there are a few positive comments for you, Martha, that you paced your talk well and gave time for all of the listeners to absorb your points. So,
I looked to see where the legislators in the 35th live. So they live in Allen, in Union, and in Potlatch. I just thought that was interesting. So
great.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the research like that can be educational too, in a kind of humorous way. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on, but I appreciate everybody's input, because it's important that we think about how, not only how we might pull our testimony together, but we say, oh, so-and-so did a good job with this. I want to include something like that in mine. A number of us in this group indicated a little bit more comfort with writing testimony. And for those folks, this handout number 4-5, which is a quick guide to telling your story, can be really more useful. The questions that are asked here are the basics for introducing yourself. Whoa, I'm getting tongue-tied here. But at the same time, it puts it more in a story form. It's a template that is a little more focused on telling your story by answering the questions. Why are you here? Why do you want to testify? What is the critical point you want them to remember? The data that you're bringing. What is your story? What is your situation? Oops, I think somebody needs to mute. Let's see. And again, what are the consequences for not creating equitable districts? Really, quite specifically, Martha illustrated that. But we're going to try. We have another volunteer reader. And I'm going to ask Jeannie Allen to read this. The nice thing about this one is that she gets to read a sample testimony for somebody who couldn't be with us today. But again, it is a real person who just can't be here. And again, listen carefully and kind of jot down your notes again. Jeannie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeannie Allen, pretending to be Allison Rotter, who wrote this testimony. So let me begin. Washington State Redistricting Committee members, please accept this written testimony for your consideration as you engage in the required process of analysis and action related to updating congressional and state legislative districts in a transparent, fair, and consistent manner across the state of Washington. I am writing to you as a resident of the city of Bremerton, located in Kitsap County. The population of Bremerton is estimated at nearly 41,000, making it the largest and most racially diverse municipality in Kitsap County. Kitsap County is currently divided amongst 3 legislative districts, the 23rd, 26th, and 35th. From a geography perspective, Bremerton is near the center and is the only municipality in the county divided also among the 3 legislative districts. While some may argue that having 3 legislative district representatives to advocate for makes for stronger advocacy given the sheer number of legislators one can communicate with, I feel strongly that it actually limits and splits the voice of Bremerton voters in having a strong, unified voice on any particular issue of concern, given that only a small geographic area and overall population of a legislator's constituents come from Bremerton. The most egregious of this occurs in the 35th legislative district, where my residence is located. As a Kitsap County resident and voter in the 35th legislative district, I'm represented by legislators that represent Mason County in its entirety and a portion of Thurston County. Historically, the legislators representing the 35th reside in, are employed in, and have deep connections to Mason County. Not only are those legislators representing a small part of Kitsap County, but it is also an even smaller constituent base that comes from Bremerton. What makes it difficult for Bremerton voters to relate to, compel, or influence the legislators in the 35th regarding matters important to Bremerton? While I always vote, regardless of how unfairly I feel my voice is heard, I know many voters that reside in Bremerton in the 35th that don't bother voting as they feel it won't matter anyhow. In addition, as the parent of 2 school-aged children within the Bremerton School District, and as elected member of the Bremerton School Board of Directors, there are 9 different legislators that represent the areas in which the schools are located within our district. This makes advocacy for education-related issues as a parent and as a board director difficult. Again, given the population and geography of the current legislative districts, the parents and voters of the Bremerton School District have a much smaller voice than other surrounding school districts, with their entire population being represented by the legislators from 1 legislative district. Given the mostly rural nature within the geography of the 35th legislative district, the issues most important to those school districts is often very different than our more urban environment in Bremerton. With this consideration in mind, I strongly urge you to create a map in which all of my community of interest, the residents and voters of Bremerton, resides within only 1 legislative district. Our collective voice should not continue to be minimized by splitting the largest municipality of Kitsap County's 40,000 voices among 3 legislative districts. Regards, Allison Rada.
Thank you, Jeannie. So again, I'm going to invite people to share their comments and the things that you remember, the key points.
Well, this is Martha. One of the things that really struck me was the way she talked about the school district. I didn't realize that's obviously very close to people's hearts, and that that's in 3 different districts. The 1 school district is in 3 legislative districts. I didn't realize that. So that made an impact on me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Others? Susan, are there comments in the chat?
Allison mentioned that the consequences she gave, one of which was saying folks don't vote. And then, oh, I don't know if this is for this, but Carolyn says that research on where the legislators live is brilliant. That was for Martha's, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Another point that was mentioned by Jay Nerf, I don't remember your first name.
Judy.
She said she recognized all 5 points in the crafting the message, the good supporting data, the good emotional points, and the ask was clear.
Mhm.
And Carolyn said school credentials of speaker caught my attention, that she's a board member and that she has kids. That gave her credibility.
Mhm.
And Jeannie mentioned 3 times more work for a school board director. And Allison mentioned school board credentials also. So yes, she definitely did give her credentials and give her the credibility, which is great.
Well, thank you all. There's a lot more I'm sure we could say, and you can see a little theme developing here, I think. One of the biggest issues in Kitsap County is the fact that sometimes the district, the state legislative districts in particular, the boundaries don't really make sense, and they don't follow the rules, at least some of the rules for which the
Also said one ask. She definitely made a good ask. One district, please. And Carolyn says to anticipate counter argument. What is the opposition to having Bremerton all in one district? And the opposition is basically trying to get enough people in all of the districts.
Mhm.
But if you go to the data lenses workshop on the 29th, Allison McCaffrey has drawn a map that has all of Bremerton in one district and then has North Kitsap joined with Mason County. And I guess South Kitsap is part of Bremerton. I don't remember exactly. Actually, it's hard to tell where, from my limited knowledge of the map, exactly where everything is. But you know, it's just is the difficulty of trying to go from one side of the state and going across and getting all the numbers to be the same. And so that's why the looking at the whole map of Washington is helpful. But you know, because Bremerton has so many people, it gives all the other districts it's in the number of people that they need to become a district. So it's challenging. Jeannie also said criteria could be contradictory. So redistricting is ever changing, especially when population changes. And the districts, the congressional and the legislative districts are only changed once every 10 years. But the local districts also have to have the equal amount of people. And the county auditors have mentioned that the fudge factor is like one person. They have to be pretty exact. So those do get changed on a regular basis. But yes, as Jeannie's bringing up, you can redistrict and you can have everybody have equal amounts in an area, and then Seattle grows in a lot faster rate, or Bremerton and Silverdale grow at a much faster rate. And then we've got, you know, one district that is much bigger than the other districts. And so that's, you know, somebody is saying, well, look and see where they're growing and try to have it redistricted with that in mind. And I don't know if that's very easy to do. I mean, it's very difficult to make a map. And so this is just making it more complicated.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Susan. And that's kind of a segue to where we're going with the last few slides here. So one of the big questions is, where do I find information for the evidence that I want to add to my testimony? There are some best practices that we have found to be quite useful. Obviously, using language from the law about guiding the redistricting process. One really good thing to do is to talk to your neighbors, your community. It's pretty interesting, the things that there may be some surprises there. I live in a pretty rural area, and I find that a lot of my neighbors are very concerned about our connections to those urban centers near us, Cambridge Island, Paulsbo, Kingston. And they want to make sure that the issues of ferries and things are included. So for a rural community, that was a little bit of a surprise. We will have another session there on the data lenses, and that's on April 29th. But you can also look at information about the Redistricting Maps app, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. There are a number of organizations, obviously, steeped in redistricting, not just the League of Women Voters.
Lenny, Donna Branch Gilby has her hand up. I don't know if it's recent or not, so if we can let her ask or
You have a
mention.
question, Donna, or you want to lower?
No, it was from before.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Donna.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the points that I want to address real specifically is
Here we go.
the key words for redistricting, remembering those points of equal population, keeping the communities of interest together, minimizing division of counties and municipalities, contiguous, convenient, and convenient is an interesting choice of words. Compact. As most of you know, the original gerrymander was this one that was drawn back in the 1800s, and it looked like a salamander, and the governor's name was Gary, so they started calling it gerrymandering.
I can't figure out how to turn it up. I've tried 2 different ways. And I did it this morning, but it's not there this afternoon.
Okay, and Maury, can you mute? There we go. Donna's muted now. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that the precincts, these local precincts, they have to be within a single legislative district. Precincts are not to be subdivided or divided among different legislative districts. And that I know is a nightmare for a lot of the counties, particularly when the precinct in the dense population areas, and the precincts are very, very much on top of one another. Moving it, 4 houses down the block can, mess things up. So, but I think we also want to emphasize that we want to. We don't want to talk as partisans, but we want to speak against favoritism to a party or a group. And that's tricky, but I think it's really important. And how do you consider all these different facts? As Susan has said, it's a real challenge for the commissioners. And so all the resources that we can muster to make our case will help them. But they're not going to be able to get everything done. Just to review, there's a couple of common themes among neighborhoods. People want to keep their community together. They want the district to be easier to travel. That might be a really key point, depending on where you live. If you live on Bainbridge Island, there are some real road issues in Bainbridge Island and on Paulsbo and other parts of our county. You want to think about whether you balance or separate low and high income areas. That's a real interesting challenge. And we might, as we prepare testimony, we might think about both sides of that. We may or may not like the idea of making a district more competitive, but I'm here to tell you that I heard from one of the commissioners in 2011, and he said, well, our first goal is to protect the incumbents. Buzzer, he's wrong. And I think we want to make sure, I think that message has already been received by the current commission, but it can be a little scary making districts more competitive, but it also means we talk to each other more. So these demographic data lenses that we've referred to a few times, Allison McCaffrey has prepared a whole module on this, and it's a wonderful presentation. And we're going to be doing it with an angle for Kitsap that Susan was referring to, Allison working on the maps that put Bremerton in a district. That's one of the pieces of this data lens module, and that will be on April 29th. I believe it's 6:30 or 6 o'clock. Anyway, you all will, if you're not already registered for that, you have an opportunity to register for it. And of course, the good news is always that we do record these. So if you absolutely can't make it, you'll be able to watch the recording. We'll put that up on our website later. But I do think it's important that you kind of look at the kinds of lenses: low income, people of color, tribal lands, industry or employment. That's an interesting one for our area. In addition to the things like municipal boundaries and so forth. Another resource is this Dave's Redistricting app. It's free. You can download it. You can explore your area. You can put down ideas. It's really quite fascinating. It's also quite a deep dive into the technology, and it's not going to appeal to all of us. We may have 100 people who want to testify or submit written testimony on different aspects of what they think is important, and 2 people who are willing to think about how that might get mapped out. However, we are looking for those eager folks. There will be an opportunity to do a listening session on mapping right before our data lenses workshop on the 29th. That's at 5 o'clock. And we'll send you information about that. I think that has not been put up on our website prominently, but we'll make sure that's part of the follow-up to this today's workshop. If there are people who are interested in being part of a mapping party for Kitsap, I know 2 people. One of them is my husband, and I'm kind of interested, but not so tech savvy. And Martha Burke has expressed interest. But if others are interested in the aspect of getting into the weeds a little bit and participating in the mapping party for Kitsap, put that in the chat and let us know, and we'll contact you if we manage to pull that off. Now there's a handout that I forgot to send you at 4.9, so that will also be in the follow-up. There are a number of organizations that are kind of into redistricting information, and they have a lot to share. The League of Women Voters of Washington, obviously, Fixed Democracy First, Politics of the Possible Inaction. This is a nonprofit that Allison McCaffrey heads up and has done a lot of work, a lot of workshops, a lot of data collection, really a good resource. The Washington Community Alliance, the Washington Voting Justice Coalition, and the Win-Win Network. And when I send you the handout, it has the websites for those. So I'm not going to ask you to put it in the chat. I'm going to ask people to share just really briefly what, to put it as my 12-year-old granddaughter says, what freaks me out. What is challenging about writing testimony for those of you in this session? And you can just unmute and chime in.
Well, I'll start. What is most challenging about writing the testimony is how to get in all the information in the very limited time. And to what would help me would be knowing a little bit about each of those 4 commissioners, so that what I said would be the kind of thing that would make them go, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought about that. That's so important. And so I think that means doing a little research on who those folks are and what trips their trigger. And what was most helpful was the 5-finger organization, to start with that. And then the handout, which I missed those in my email, but I will go back and dig them out because I want to look at those. So thank you very much.
Any other quick challenges? That's a really good one about doing research on the commissioners, and we might make sure that there's material included for you to easily find that. It's on their website, the commission, redistricting commission website.
So this is Martha again. I think we've heard a lot of comments and that information on where to get the data, the research.
Mhm.
That's what that was the thing for me, to make sure you're getting accurate data.
Mhm. Yeah, and we'll try to help all we can there. I'm going to move on so we can finish up on time. There are some best practices that are always nice. If you're into the weeds with us on the and can attach a map, that's really great. The key things to remember for everybody: keep it brief, to the point, with a specific ask, and have a copy to send. In this case, the public testimony in person is probably not going to happen at all this year. Certainly now they're meeting virtually. Uh-oh. My screen is locked. There we go. So first, finally, I'm going to give you a few do's and don'ts. The visual appeal of your written testimony is important. Bullets rather than paragraphs as you write is helpful. The keywords, we've talked about those several times. And we will make available, I forgot to mention this, the slides can be shared with you afterwards, so you can kind of pick up some of those things that were not in the handouts and were on the slides. Know your facts, that's a challenge. Thank the commission for their thankless task. You can't imagine how much they appreciate that. We want to be careful about being accusatory, and that also includes getting partisan. That's something that we want to avoid. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. Even though all of us as individuals have some pretty partisan opinions, we do try to keep those out of the things we do and try to be balanced in our research. And then going over your space or time limits is really unpopular. And in fact, they will cut you off if there are a lot of people testifying. So you do kind of need to think, as Susan told us already, about how you can target 2 minutes and, plan to be able to cut it, have the things pulled out so you can do it in 1 minute, and or expand it to 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes if they give you more time. So once you leave this session, you can work on the next steps of using the templates to write a testimony and work on turning it into a script for testifying in person. That'll involve some things with timing and some other stuff that we'll get into next week. And again, if you're not able to be with us next week, we will also be taping that session, and you can always watch it, and you can review this one again, because that video will be up, and we'll do a follow-up email. So I thank you all for your time and your attention, and I'm gonna kind of hop to the last slide, I think. Maybe there's one more. Module 5 is the one we're doing next week, and it's about testifying. It's next Saturday, April 17th, same time, 1:30 to 3:30. And if you're not signed up for that, you can be. And then I want to conclude with telling you that this is how you can join the listserv for the Redistricting 2021. We will put this in written form in our follow-up email to all of you, so that you have the link. It's rather lengthy, but if you just Google Redistricting Washington 2021, you're going to get to their website. It's now been up and running for, I don't know, a month, maybe a little longer. I can't remember. But that concludes our session today. We're hoping that we see many of you next week, if not all of you. And I do have a little time for questions. I'm going to quit sharing if I can figure out how to do that. So if there are things in the chat that I need to pay attention to, well, thank you all. That's nice comments.
Lenny, I think it's important that we ask if anybody would like to have us try to set up some coaching opportunities. That way we can, try to get them set up before we see you next week. So if you would like to be set up with a coach, would you put your name in the chat
Or
indicating?
you can email us. I sent a reminder email, I think, to everyone. I'm not sure I got to you, Donna, so I'm going to double look back. I didn't have your email in my list, so it must be somewhere.
I right now am sending Donna your last handouts.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to send to everyone the one that I forgot to attach, which is useful because it's got all those resources on it. So we're happy to finish a little bit early, but if there are questions, there's a few of you still left if you want to unmute and ask any questions. Otherwise, have a good day, get a little fresh air and sunshine.
Thank you.